Today, we're going to see the recap of a sci-fi mystery thriller called Signs. Graham wakes up early in the morning, sensing something isn't right. Merrill, Graham's younger brother, also gets out of bed with the same feeling. They run outside and hear Graham's children's voices coming from the cornfield. They both run to see what's going on and find Graham's daughter, Bo, and his son, Morgan, staring at something in the crop field. Graham investigates and finds their dogs, Isabel and Houdini, running around in a crop circle that has mysteriously appeared in the middle of their property. Graham later makes a call, trying to find out if Lionel and his gang, the local troublemakers, were responsible. He then finds Bo and Morgan, and they tell them that Houdini is sick as he's peed in the kitchen. Caroline, the local sheriff, makes a visit and Graham explains what had happened. Outside, Morgan approaches Bo and she tells him the water she's drinking is contaminated. Morgan tastes it and tells her to give it to Houdini, but the dog suddenly snaps and shows signs of rage. Graham shows Caroline the field, and she states the crop formation is beyond Lionel's skills. She also informs him of reports of animals behaving strangely, some becoming violent. Graham suddenly notices the farm is too quiet and he heads back. They find Morgan and see that he had stabbed Houdini in the neck. Morgan explains that Houdini was acting crazy and was trying to kill Bo. He cries and takes a dose from his inhaler. Graham then takes Bo into the house and tells Merrill to tie up Isabel. Later that night, Bo surprises her dad in his bedroom, telling him there's a monster outside her room, and she also asks for water. Graham dismisses it as a nightmare and asks her why she didn't drink the water on her night table. She replies saying it tastes weird. He takes her back into bed, and when he looks out the window, he sees a figure standing on their roof. He wakes up his brother, telling him Lionel and his gang might be outside. They plan to catch them and begin running in opposite directions while shouting. When they meet, they spot something on the roof, and Merrill asks if Graham is certain it's Lionel. It then quickly jumps over them and runs into the cornfield. The next day, Caroline is back in their house and Morgan plays with her walkie-talkie. She promises to get him an extra one from the station and advises him to use Bo's old baby monitor in the meantime. Later, Graham tells Bo to go to bed, handing her a glass of water. Bo doesn't want it, saying all the glasses on top of the TV have hair, dust, or germs. Graham then takes the glasses away and notices there are more all over the house. He joins Caroline and Merrill in the kitchen and they begin retelling what had passed. Unfortunately, the brothers can't remember specific details other than the intruder being tall and quick. Bo then disturbs them, asking for the remote. She mentions that all the channels on TV are showing the same program. They all get curious and head to the living room to see it. The TV shows a number of reports regarding the sudden emergence of hundreds of crop circles in different countries. An expert explains that due to the amount and speed at which they formed, he supposes they could be legitimate and not some kind of hoax. Graham then walks Caroline out. She advises him to take the family and head to town to get their mind off what's been going on. Graham takes the advice and later takes the kids and Merrill into town. They split up and Graham tells them to meet back at a pizza parlor in a few minutes. Bo and Morgan head to a bookstore where Morgan looks for books about extraterrestrials. Graham heads to a pharmacy to get asthma medicine for Morgan, while Merrill goes to an army recruitment office. At the pharmacy, the attendant asks Graham if the world is ending and asks if she can have a chance to confess her sins. Graham says he hasn't been a reverend for months, but that doesn't stop her. At the army recruitment office, Merrill speaks with the soldier in charge, and he tells him the army has been receiving reports of strange shadows and figures lurking around the town. The soldier tells Merrill the aliens are probably doing reconnaissance to prepare the other forces for arrival. Merrill shrugs it off, but the soldier suddenly recognizes Merrill as a famous local minor league baseball player. Merrill confirms it, saying he still has the bat that set the record for the farthest home run. At the bookshop, Bo asks the seller for a different glass of water. Morgan tells the lady not to bother, as Bo has a quirk about her drinking water since she was a baby. Morgan then buys the book on extraterrestrials. Minutes later, the family meets up at a pizza parlor and they see a man, Ray, getting into his car. Bo asks who the man is, but nobody answers and they all keep staring. Ray speeds away and they continue eating. The family gets home and Morgan gets a signal on Beau's baby monitor. He asks if it could receive signals from the aliens, but Graham and Meryl dismiss him. Meryl tells him the crop circles are just hoaxes created by people with too much time to spend. Morgan hands the baby monitor to Graham but asks him to be careful as they could lose the signal. As they exit the car, the baby monitor suddenly makes a sound and they all stop. Meryl asks for the baby monitor and as Graham hands it over, it catches another transmission. Graham is still in denial, but Meryl gives in, telling Graham not to move as they could lose the signal. Beau and Morgan climb on top of the car as Morgan tries to get better reception. Morgan says he can hear two aliens talking but the signal cuts off. That night, Graham goes to feed Isabel, but the dog is barking furiously at the crops. He takes a flashlight and enters the cornfield to investigate. He senses something moving around in the foliage and he gets to a clearing. Believing it's just someone messing with him, he starts shouting, saying they won't get the attention they want. He starts making his way back but gets spooked and drops his flashlight. When he manages to get it back on, he sees an oddly long leg stepping into the shadows. He flees, running back to the house. When he gets back in, everybody sees he's startled. He then tells them to turn the TV on. The news shows strange lights coming from what appears like a massive object hovering over Mexico City. The family stares in awe, unable to comprehend what they're seeing. The kids fall asleep and Meryl and Graham talk. Meryl asks if the world is ending, and Graham says he thinks so. Meryl gets disappointed and tells Graham to pretend as if he were still a pastor, asking him to give comforting words. Graham then tells him that in situations like these, people usually break down into two groups, those who believe in coincidences, and those who think that everything happens for a reason. For the first group, they see the lights and think it's a coincidence. The lights are evidence of impending doom, which fills them with fear. The second group, however, sees the lights and see them as a sign, a miracle, that someone is watching over them. This fills them with hope. Graham then asks Meryl if he believes in coincidences or in miracles. Instead of giving a straight answer, Meryl narrates a funny story about when he was at a party with a girl. They both laugh and Meryl then says he sees the lights as a miracle. He then asks Graham what he believes in. Graham says it doesn't matter, as he succeeded in comforting Meryl. He then tells Meryl about his late wife Colleen's last words. He says they were swing away. Meryl asks what it means, and Graham says it was probably a random memory of Meryl playing baseball which popped into her head. Graham found it difficult to find meaning in Colleen's final words. It was at that point he started losing his faith. He then declares that no one is watching over them. They are all on their own. The next scene is a flashback, which shows Graham when he was still a reverend, arriving at a place where an accident occurred. Caroline tells him that Ray had fallen asleep and hit Colleen. Graham asks which ambulance she's in, and Caroline tells him Colleen isn't in an ambulance. The following day, Graham finds Meryl in a storage room, obsessing over the news. Meanwhile, Beau and Morgan are reading the extraterrestrial book. According to the book, the aliens are here to either explore the universe or to invade the planet for resources. Graham flips through the book and sees a farmhouse creepily resembling their own. The phone suddenly rings and Graham answers it, hearing only one word. He decides to go to Ray's house as he believes it was him who called. He gets to Ray's place and finds him in his car. He sees the car is packed with luggage. Graham asks what happened and Ray tells him he'd been wanting to call him for a long time. He says something entered his house and he panicked. He also says Graham's number was the only number he could think to call. He talks about the accident and tells Graham he had been exhausted from work that day. He says there were no cars or people on the road. Had he fallen asleep a few seconds earlier or later, he wouldn't have hit Colleen. He implies that the accident was almost meant to happen. Graham asks where he intends to go and Ray tells him he's going to a lake. He assumes the aliens dislike water, since the crop circles seen are all located in places far from water. Finally, Ray apologizes for the accident and for making Graham lose his faith. Just before driving away, Ray tells Graham he trapped an alien inside his pantry. Back at the farmhouse, Meryl sees first-hand footage of one of the aliens walking past an alley. Graham decides to enter Ray's house and finds the pantry door barricaded. He loudly announces he's a police officer and that other officers are on their way. He believes whatever's trapped in the pantry is just a hooligan messing around in the town. Graham tries to get a look at whoever's on the other side with a knife, but fails. After nearly leaving, his curiosity gets the best of him and he returns. As he tries to get a look, a hand reaches for him. He gets startled, takes the knife and cuts off the alien's fingers. He gets back home and tells everyone about the encounter. He advises they move to the lake too, but the others refuse. Graham is outvoted and they decide to board up the doors and windows to prepare for the aliens. News reports later show that more flying saucers are being spotted around the world. The ships happen to be appearing within a mile of crop circles, and there are reports of the aliens using poisonous gas to kill people. They block most of the doors and windows but end up running out of wood. Meryl suggests having dinner and Graham tells them they can have whatever they want. At the dinner table, Morgan suggests they say a prayer and Graham sternly refuses. He gets angry and tells everyone he won't waste his time praying. He begins hoarding the food and eating it all while the kids cry. He soon starts crying as well and Morgan gets up to hug him. Bo joins in and Graham pulls Meryl to join the group hug. They all sob and cry together, realizing the night could be their last. All of a sudden, the baby monitor starts ringing. They start hearing noises and footsteps from outside and then from the roof. The family decides to head to the basement. Graham guards the door as Meryl looks for something to barricade the door with. He finds an axe but accidentally hits the light bulb. Morgan finds a flashlight and Meryl looks around the basement. Meryl and Graham use flashlights to look for an old coal chute and converge on the backside of the basement, finding Morgan. Suddenly, an alien hand grabs him from behind. Everything gets chaotic, but they manage to save Morgan. However, Morgan has a sudden asthma attack and Graham attempts to calm him down. Eventually, Morgan's breathing goes back to normal. Another flashback shows Graham back at the accident. Caroline tells him that Colleen had been pinned between Ray's truck and a tree, and they couldn't pull her out as it would be her end. Graham realizes that it would be the last time he'd get to speak with Colleen. Morning comes and Meryl and Graham hear from the radio that the aliens are leaving. Meryl says they left in a hurry and some of the wounded were abandoned. They decide to head out as Morgan desperately needs his asthma medicine. They find the house ransacked but empty. Graham places Morgan on the sofa and gets the TV. When he gets back, an alien is holding Morgan hostage, threatening to release a deadly poison gas from its wrist. All of them stand in horror, watching the alien cradle Morgan. Graham is once again back at the accident and he gets to Colleen. As she lays dying, she tells Graham her final words. She says to tell Morgan to keep playing his games and for Bo to listen to Morgan, as he'll protect her. She tells Graham to see, and finally, she says to tell Meryl to swing away. Graham finally makes sense of his wife's dying words. She was telling him to see the signs, to see that there are no coincidences. Graham looks around the room, and his gaze stops at Meryl's bat. Just as Colleen had said, he tells Meryl to swing away. His brother realizes what he means and immediately grabs his bat. The alien releases its poison and Meryl takes a swing. Graham grabs Morgan and Meryl keeps hitting the alien. It falls and water gets spilled on it. Upon contact with the water, the alien's skin gets burnt and starts melting. Meryl and Graham then look at all the glasses of water Bo had been leaving around the house. They take advantage of them. Graham takes Morgan out and injects him with an EpiPen shot. Meryl takes one final swing at the alien and it gets bathed in water, effectively killing it. Outside, Meryl joins Graham and they hope the alien's gas didn't get into Morgan's lungs, as he was having serious trouble breathing. He's convincing himself that Morgan having asthma couldn't be a coincidence. Morgan starts talking and they're all very relieved. Morgan asks if someone had saved him and Graham says he believes someone did. Time passes and the final scene shows Graham getting dressed, preparing to head back to church. Thanks for watching. If you like our content, please like the video and don't forget to subscribe.